the f knows how to do taxes?
I got my car repossessed.
Is this what I'm striving for? Is this what I'm supposed to be learning? Why didn't I learn about this stuff when I was in school?
What is going on, my Brewhoo Nation? My name is Dakota Broski. With me is my co-host, Richard.
Hi guys, how you doing?
And today we're going to be going over some things that are, well, some of us can relate to. Adulting is hard, especially when you're not prepared for it.
It's just something that popped up to me recently, and I thought it would be fun to talk about. And by fun, I mean actually really disappointing and tragically just demoralizing to talk about. But I feel like it's something important to talk about at the end of the day. When you're in school, especially like in middle school, high school, even in college, like it's drilled into you that you need to do your studies. You need to, know all these languages, language arts. You need to know how to do crazy arithmetic, algebra, geometry, whatever it is. And somehow I also need to know the history of the War of 1812. Apparently that's really relevant to my whole existence in life. And then you actually get into the real world and you realize that a lot of the things they teach you in school aren't really relevant to your daily life. I've had 4 concussions. 4. That is not a little amount. That is more than someone should probably have. And one of the biggest things I think for being an adult is knowing how to take care of yourself in a, manner that is, calling your doctor, going to different appointments, understanding what your doctor is telling you and procedures you need to follow. No one teaches you that in school. No one teaches you what healthcare is. No one teaches you what health insurance is. No one teaches you that you need to know what a copay is. No one teaches you those life lessons. Those are things pretty much either your parents teach you or you're stumbling along and asking questions at a hospital or a doctor's office, and that's perfectly legitimate. Like, there's no issues asking those things, but there's this, a big difference between, being an adult and knowing I need to make appointments and I need to go to these places and pushing things off. And I know there's the whole idea that, especially guys do this all the time, I'm guilty of this, where we have an issue or we're sick or we have a pulled muscle or a pulled nerve or something happens concussion. And we're I'm just getting a concussion and we're just I'm gonna ignore this, it's perfectly fine, don't do that. But I think that's one of the biggest telltale signs of being an adult is knowing how to take care of yourself in a healthy manner. And that's not to say you can't have McDonald's, you can't have fun fast food, or you can't go have beer, whatever it is. But it's learning that you are not a 16-year-old that can pound away at tons and tons of donuts and just be perfectly fine. There's you have to take care of your body and take care of who you are as a person. And there was that's just one of the aspects of being an adult that I don't think anyone actually teaches you. And I think everyone can kind of relate to that, especially once you hit your mid-20s and onwards. Your body starts kind of breaking down. And these are things that they don't teach you.
Yeah, 25, your body, your metabolism slows down. And I know so many people that just do not know how to take care of themselves. I got lucky because I feel like you're guaranteed to gain weight if you don't have a strict know-how on your metabolism. So I weighed 145 pounds, right? Going out of high school. And when my 25 hit, I was up to 180 to 200. And luckily for me, that's the weight that people want me to be in. So me being underweight and my metabolism changing, I never changed my eating habits. I just ended up, at the right weight. So I got lucky. Now, working at the office, I'm kind of not walking 8 miles a day. I'm kind of gaining a little bit of weight, which is kind of, you got to get back to the walking habits. But a lot of people don't have that fortunate, if I don't change or keep a strict diet, I'm probably going to gain 40 pounds, and I'm not going to realize
You don't realize
it
how
until it's too
healthy
late.
walking is.
Yeah,
Walking is a really good, this is something that my girlfriend had to teach me. I am someone that I played soccer all of my life. I played sports all of my life. I don't particularly like walking. I'm someone who likes running, but the last 4 months I haven't been able to do that because, like I said, I'm on my 4th concussion. This one isn't exactly healing correctly. I'm actually going to be getting visual therapy, which is kind of reteaching my brain how to see things, which is a crazy thought process that I have to do that because you don't really think when you're playing a sport, oh, I'm going to have some crazy consequences at some age, but it is. Walking is actually something that is fantastic for you. It's something that has really assisted me in the last couple of months, not being able to work out that much, just being able to I have a Fitbit and track myself to walk 10,000 steps a day with the dog, whatever it is. And like, it really makes a difference just like walking. That, like, I feel when we were kids, not kids, but like teenagers, even in college, like on breaks or whatever it was, I feel like I could just sit at home and play video games for like 8 hours straight and be like, this is fine, while I, chug some sugary high C juice or Capri Sun and then eating on chips and like everything's great. But then you realize, oh, this is like killing my body. Like, you don't really like, in health class, they tell you these things, but they don't really tell you because like you're a kid and you're not really paying attention. And that's just, taking care of your body is like, I think the hardest thing as an adult, and it's like the first thing that they need to really like drill into your head.
Blood clots are real. They will kill you. I get anxious. I've been doing for a channel, a client. I've been editing a video. They're doing like an hour-long video on like Fist of the North Star, and it's like every minute's a detailed edited, so it takes about an hour a minute. So it's about like 34 hours of work on my half. And just sitting here like 8 hours at my desk it makes me anxious at a certain point. Like, I gotta get up, I gotta get out of the house, I gotta go. Like, I can't do this.
Oh yeah, like you have to make sure you're like looking away from the monitor. Like, I think the rules like 20-20-20. You're supposed to like you're staring at your computer for 20 minutes, and then you're supposed to like stare at a blank wall for 20 minutes, like to readjust your eyes. And you're like, you close your eyes for like 20 seconds. No, 20 minutes. I'm sorry. It's 20 minutes, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. I apologize. So it's
never heard this.
Yeah, you're supposed to like, that's something my ophthalmologist taught me. Like, you're supposed, just like 20 minutes on your screen, 20 minutes on your screen, 20 seconds at a blank wall, and 20 seconds like just closing your eyes to like readjust, because like you will burn out your eyes. That's the reason that people have those blue light glasses. But like,
I use those too to stop my headaches. But like,
it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, because again, like, who's gonna tell? Like, who is?
And now we circle back around to things we should know as a kid or growing up.
No, you really should. And like, even going with that, understanding how the healthcare system works. So much of the world has socialized healthcare, which is great because you don't have to think about like, yes, you might have to think about some bills, but you don't have to think about, oh, I got to get certain insurance. Does my insurance cover me for this? Does my insurance allow me to, like, no one teaches you that. And like, not everyone has the luxury of like having a parent or an adult that's going to be able to teach you that. It's something you're not really specifically taught ever. And a lot of people end up making gigantic mistakes, not even mistakes, but just like not knowing what's happening and end up with a gigantic bill, like no different than the kids that, get predatory loans for college and everything because no one's there to teach them. And no one's like, you're told, hey, take out these $60,000 and, you can go to school for a year and you're all good. Don't worry about it. And then you've got to have school and you have like $120,000 of loans. And you're like, how did this happen? It's the same thing with like medical bills. No one ever tells you how those systems really work because you're like, oh, I'm insured. Because when you're like, that's what you hear. You're like, I'm insured. That means I'm good to go. And then you have some procedure done and you have a gigantic couple $1,000 bill as well. Like, just getting my ears, I had an ear infection last year and ended up with like a $600 bill for that. And I'm sitting here like, I have pretty decent healthcare. How do I have a giant bill? And you see like, oh, the charge for it was like $6,000. Like the insurance covered that part of it, but I still have to pay $600. And that's a bill you're not expecting. It's like when you see, yeah, it is. It's like when you see like all those, like if you watch TikTok and you see someone ends up like, giving childbirth. That's like $1 million. People don't tell you it's $1 million at least, like, give birth to a kid. Like, the time in the hospital room, the actual delivery, like, that's a gigantic bill. Could you imagine, like, not being insured for that? Do you wonder, like, just things that we're not told growing up that are super important?
I remember I got, when I was working at the post office as a mailman, my insurance was always like, post office insurance is really good. I'm like, all right, cool. So I went to the dentistry, and they were like, oh, yeah, sure, we can get you, free preventative care. I'm like, all right, cool. And they're like, well, to fix your mouth, it's going to be about $5,000. I'm like, I'm sorry? And they're like, yeah, no, we have, you have preventative care, but you don't have, like, fixing care. But, you can bring $5,000, we'll fix you right up. Like,
it feels like the healthcare system is predatory like that sometimes, where they're just telling you, yeah, we can do this for you. And then you have a gigantic bill and you do not really understand what happened. And no one's there to, like, they're not going to tell you that because, like, it's such a broken system that they're not even knowing how much they're charging or how much insurance is going to pay for you. Because some people have outstanding insurance where that $5,000 might have been covered completely. But like U.S. government employees have very good healthcare in
Oh my
comparison
God, it's so good.
to most people. And
Yeah.
then it's crazy that you're end up like, yeah, they wanted $5,000 for that. Like, what if you didn't have that? What if you had like the minimum healthcare? Because that's what a lot of companies will end up doing. They'll just like, because it's illegal for them not to like offer some kind of healthcare, they give you like the absolute butts worst healthcare, and just you end up getting screwed for even like wanting to go like to see a regular checkup. You'll have like a $90 copay, and you're like, I got charged $90 just to see a doctor and have them tell me I'm okay. Like that's insane to me, and it's just it. How do you budget for that as a kid? Like no one tells you how to budget for this stuff.
No, I feel like dentistry is a lot more predatorial because I think there are a lot more privately owned companies out there as like dentistries, at least in my state. So I feel like a lot of them are a lot more name your own price kind of thing.
100%.
Yes, that and then but certain hospitals are pretty okay to work with. My hospital I went to is Duke, a part of Duke, and they do this thing where if you don't have insurance, they take about like $80 off the top of your bill, which is still $5,000. 80% of that's still a lot, but better than 5,000. And for being uninsured,
100%.
that's really cool. So like there are places, do your research and all that stuff. So what else? What's your
That's it. Like there's assistance programs for so many things that like are so hidden away. And one of them that we'll go through is taxes. Who the fuck knows how to do taxes? Like
I'm so pissed off.
When
about
you're
taxes
16, how do you know how to do tax? How is a 16-year-old supposed to know how to do taxes? Why do they not talk about taxes in school? Like, like that's one of the things that drives me the most nuts. Like, how do you not tell kids, hey, taxes are kind of important? And it's such a game. Like, taxes are such a game where it's like the government kind of knows what we know what you owe us. And they're like, can you tell us? And they're like, no, you got to figure it out yourself. And you're like, is this right? And they're like, audit.
Oh, and then TurboTax. Oh, that's predatorial stuff right there.
Oh,
That's
like
a monopoly.
TurboTax, yeah, the whole entire thing of
God.
TurboTax and all of those programs where they're like, oh, we can do free taxes for you, and you see all like the underlining little legal text that says like only for like this amount of thing and only for this and this, like, and you're gonna end up like paying for that. Like there are free government programs to get your taxes done, but they are so hit because it'll be illegal for them not to, but they're so hidden away. It's so impossible, and like you go on like. The government site is so janky for it. Like, it's such a janky looking site to get your taxes actually done for free. And it just leaves you wondering if you, like, sold your Social Security to some fraudulent website. Like, it shouldn't feel like that. It shouldn't feel like my own government is against us. And that's another part of, like adulting that people don't recognize. In the school system, we are taught the government is for us. They are going to help us. They're going to protect us. They're going to do all these things. And then, like, you recognize what a dog-eat-dog world it really is out there. And that's not something that you're really taught as a kid and something you have to adapt as an adult. Unless you're really thrust into a parental kind of role at a young age, or you are kind of have more adult-like responsibilities at a young age. Like, most people don't expect what really comes out of the world after school.
I got lucky. I started working at, like, 15. So I had a general idea of like paycheck and, you know, I blew it though. My parents didn't teach me any kind of like budgeting or savings or like, you know, put it away for something.
But as a 15-year-old, how are you supposed to know that?
Yeah, I bought skateboards and clothes and really expensive sunglasses like that looked ugly because it was 2008. Like it was, not good.
Budgeting is something that's just, you don't, even holding a budget is not something like some schools. I granted, I will give some schools some credit. There are high schools out there that like there are courses, business courses for like home planning and budgeting and kind of learning how to, you know, do the ropes of the real world when it comes to certain things. Like I know for a fact I had in one of my like courses, I think it was in 8th grade, like it wasn't even how to create a budget. It was just make one. It was like, hey, go get a car, figure out what your monthly payments are. Go get an apartment and figure out what like rent is, and like we have to like make a little detailed portfolio of how much things cost. And like when you're a kid, you're like, oh yeah, this all costs like $3,000 a month, whatever it is. No big deal. You don't think about those numbers when you're little. And then in the real world, you're like, oh, this is just $3,000 for this. What about all those other random expenses that have to like come up?
Yeah, there's so many people that burn their budget just getting like,
yeah.
Oh, I bought a house and now I have $1,200 a month I pay. I make $3,000, but they don't factor in, you know, car and insurance and groceries. And then you have like $5.
Or just random things that pop up.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a kid or if you have a pet, like, there's so many random little expenses that'll pop up that you don't really, like, you have a pet. What if they have something, they got to go to a vet, $180, $200, whatever it is. You got to feed them.
God, vets are pricey too.
Another, pet food is expensive. You have a kid, you have to feed your kid, you have to clothe your kid, like, whatever it is. Like, the American dream that we are sold on and told in school so many times is not a realistic standard, and it's
not anymore.
It's something,
not at all.
Yeah, it's just you're not, like, when you're a kid, you're taught all of these things, and when you're an adult, you realize, is this what I'm striving for? Is this what I'm supposed to be learning? Is this, like, why didn't I learn about this stuff when I was in school? I think one of the really hard things to reconcile with as an adult is seeing what other people are doing around you and trying not to compare yourself to them. Because Tom, Dick, and Harry might be, making $120,000 and going on some vacation to Acapulco, and you're sitting here making however much it is, and you're like, why am I not as good as them? But it's not really questioning if you're good enough or as good as them. It's just learning as an adult that you need to run your own race. I think that's a huge thing, is, like, as an adult.
Everyone is not created equal.
No.
In
you don't know where they started, and they don't know where
Yeah.
you started. Like, you might have started, in their head, you could have started, like, 200 feet behind the starting line that they started at, or you could have started, 20 feet ahead of them. Like, you don't really know where it is. So, like, the only way to really be successful as an adult is to really run your own race and understand, like, you are doing everything the best you can. And again, that's not really something that they teach you in school. In school, they're like, everyone's equal, everything's awesome, and you're gonna do great. And, like, that's not really how it is. I don't know if it's, like, an archaic system that we're taught in school, but, like, the concept of, like, let's go to jobs then. Jobs are not easy. And I'm not even talking about executing a job. I mean getting to the point that you get to execute a job. I mean, like, applying for jobs. The amount of interviewing processes that people don't understand or go through is just nuts to me. I used to run an internship at one of my old programs, and I would get all these resumes, and it's crazy to me that, like, you're not really taught how to write a resume in school. You need to be proactive and go to resume writing classes. You need to, like, go to look online, and, like, granted, there are so many things out there to help you do it. It's just not something that's really taught. Like, you have to be really proactive, and that's really one of your first steps at learning how to be an adult, is proactively being like, how do I write a resume? How do I apply for a job? How do I interview correctly? Because you don't realize how hard it is to actually, like, interview or, like, keep your calm and keep your cool when you're doing this, especially in an economy that is not always super helpful and friendly to people to actually, like, get them jobs, because there's responsible people out there. Again, this runs back to run your own race, where you could be applying to 1,012 things and not get anything back. But, again, Tom, Dick, and Harry might be applying to one thing and get their call instantaneously. And you're like, am I bad at what I do? Or is it just, did they know someone? Like, how did this process happen?
I've gotten pretty lucky with my job interviews. 9 times out of 10, there were times where, I was filling out 100 applications and maybe getting one offer, and the job wasn't as good as it was. But 9 times out of 10, I didn't start getting my job. I've worked a lot of jobs, and all of my jobs have been through reference of somebody else. I figured out what my friends are doing, asked them about what they were doing, and then, hey, you need somebody for this, or, what's it like, and going from there. So a lot of my, jobs I've gotten have been through networking and connecting with, friends. Also, that has helped me out a lot now, because now I know how to network. But that was something I taught myself, and not, school. My school was pretty, I give them credit, because they did try. My favorite class I took was probably business and entrepreneurship. Small business.
I had one of those classes.
Yeah, that was fun. Great teacher. She had a small business of her own, and she just, taught us a lot of, like, writing your business resume or your business plan, budgeting, all that stuff, traps not to fall into. So that was cool, because it was a person who was hands-on with what they're doing and teaching it to someone, not reading out of a book.
That's the best kind of teachers, and I don't think there's enough kind of teachers out there, where there's so many teachers out there that will teach from an archaic book from, like, 1970, and this is the world, everything's great. It's really the teachers you always remember, the ones that kind of went off the book, like, outside of the book, like, just did their own thing to really teach you, like, outside real life things. And those are the teachers that actually, like, stay with you. Those are the actual times you learn some life lessons. And I think I appreciated those teachers, and I understood what they were doing, but I think I kind of took it for granted of like what they were actually doing.
Yeah. Oh my God. Another class was it wasn't in big detail about like what to do, but it was actually a really cool class. It was called God, what was it? It was Home Economics 101, and it taught the most basic shit about just being manners and start cooking things.
Home ec
And
classes are important. They're
dude,
very important.
it wasn't an actual cooking class, but it was like home economics, just stuff you would do at home. Like
Yes.
I don't think they taught taxes. I think they taught things like memory and practices to have for yourself if you have like bad memory or you have bad habits of doing stuff. Just things to help you in life.
One of the home ec things I remember, because they split it into like 3 different cycles, is like we learned how to sew. And I remember being in 6th grade being like, this is stupid. This is for girls. Why do I need to sew? And it's funny enough, like knowing how to sew and learning how to sew back then actually really has helped me. There's a couple times like a pair of jeans or something is ripped, like there's a tiny hole. Even like one of my favorite sweatshirts, there's a tiny hole that I can sew it back together. I've done it before. And I think in our capitalistic world, we're like, oh, there's a hole in this piece of clothing, I'm going to throw it away. A lot of times you can just really sew it, and that it really does make a difference. People really do not appreciate like a home ec class until
I got my
they really need it.
Yeah, my suit I was wearing for one of my shows. It's like I wear a tuxedo when I sing, so I had a button that popped off, and I knew how to sew that back. That was pretty cool.
Let me ask you something. When was, and it could be a positive or a negative, but when was the first time you were kind of just like, oh, I'm an adult? Like, it could be a negative thing where you're just like, oh, something happened. You're like, oh, God, I have to take care of this because I'm an adult. Or, like, you could have been really proud of yourself in one moment and been like, I'm an adult now. Like, I've done it.
I got my car repossessed when I had nothing else to fall back on, and I was like 23, I think. I was always like entrepreneuring and stuff like that. So, but I moved. Oh, God, what was it? 2013. I moved from North Carolina to Utah, trying to go to California, but got stuck in Utah because my mom lived there, and we just clicked really well. So living there, I got a job at a factory in town. So through that factory job, it was overnight. So it was like really good pay for just get like 23, the most money I've ever made in my life every 2 weeks. And I would just, save it, spend it, travel around America. And then I ended up getting a car because I drove my crappy Honda to California during July through Death Valley. I spent $1,000 on this Honda and drove it, and it made it there, but it didn't make it back. And I left it on the side of the road to Death Valley and had to get a ride back to Vegas, catch a flight to go back to Utah. But then when I got there, the next day I went out and went to one of those $10,000 or under cars places.
Yeah.
First time buyer, whatever, and got approved for a really shitty. I mean, it was a great car, but it was like, now that I'm older, I realize how crappy it was. It's like a kid buying their first hatchback. Like, you're an adult now, don't buy a hatchback. But I bought like a 2008 Eclipse, and the really ugly bubbly ones. I thought it was the coolest thing ever when I was a kid. But anyways, it was $10,000, and I paid off like maybe $4,000 of that before I quit my job and wanted to make my own business. And then I made my own business, and it failed. Banks don't stop. They want their money, and then they will come and get that car. So my car got repossessed. I had to go back to work, and then I ended up having to pay that off later, but never get the car back. So that was like $4,000 I had to work off to not have it on my credit, and then my credit just started tumbling down and down and down. And that's when sometimes, like me, you don't realize that you're an adult now and this is the real world. Nobody's coming to get you until you're already at that low, like you're already hit that, you already fucked something up, basically. So that was my first, oh God, I'm an adult moment. Now we're fine. But like 24, 3, oh man, that hit hard. It's the biggest kick in the dick
That actually,
ever.
yeah, it really is. That's got to be a scary thing, because it's really like you said, like,
I told
the banks
nobody.
don't stop. The banks do not stop, like, coming for that money, like, no matter what happens, like, whether it is credit card bills, whether it is medical bills, whether it's like college bills, like those bills keep coming. And I think that's what ends up happening to a lot of people. They don't have good money management, and I mean, sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's not their fault, but like, we live in a world where I think big corporations really want us all to be in debt. Like, that's an obvious thing. Like, they want us all to be constantly in debt. You were promised these like random monthly payments that you're going to be okay with for whatever procedures it is, like if it's a car, a house, whatever it is, and you're like, oh, I can afford this.
Now.
But like, they'll end up you would get now, but like it's one of those things where they're very predatory like that. That you sign something you don't really realize that you signed, and you're just getting screwed over by it over and over again because it was like a mistake you made years and years ago.
Me and Felicia needed a car bad because her car just broke down and we had nothing. So I just went. We had good credit, good savings. So we were like, you know what? Let's go to this one of these places. Did it, and then bought a car. And then I didn't realize how much we overpaid. Like, it's a great car. It's going to last us till my daughter or my son learn how to drive it. But I still overpaid for it by about like $15,000. Although it's one owner and it'll last me, it's still if I crashed it right now, insurance would not cover what I owe for it. Like right now, like there's about $10,000 in limbo I would still have to pay.
Car insurance. That's another
thing.
one.
Yeah.
No one teaches you about car insurance because people don't teach you the different rates and like what you're paying for it, and it just that is a huge thing. My first car was totaled, not my fault. I was sitting at a stoplight and some car came around the bend and just drilled into me going like around 55-ish, tore off my whole entire back of my car, ended up hitting me so hard like I smashed into the person in front of me then, so like I just got crunched and it was one of those things where like I was only 17. Hashtag first concussion. No, I actually don't think I got concussion from that one. I should have though, or maybe I did and just didn't realize it. But yeah, that was one of those things where it was a weird hassle. It wasn't my fault whatsoever. The person had the bare minimum insurance, just bare minimum. So I think their payout was like so appallingly terrible. Like it wouldn't even have covered what my car was. So my own insurance had to cover for like the rest of it for like the accident. Not for their stuff, obviously, but for my car. So when they wrote the check for like, oh, here's your replacement car, like here's a check for your car, like here you go. If you ever get in a car accident, like knock on wood, hopefully none of you ever do, you have to go through a whole entire kind of interview process that you go through their insurance agent and your own insurance agent. Sometimes if it's specifically their fault, your insurance will take care of the interview process of like you talking to theirs. They'll be like, it's your fault. So like after like we stopped recording the call for insurance reasons, and they were explaining to me like, this is why you need to have good insurance, and I didn't know what insurance I had. My parents set it up at the time. I was still under them, but like that's why they explained to me like you need to have like these are certain things you need to get set up when you get car insurance, because you need certain coverage when you have different things that happen for different liabilities, because they're like you don't want to end up like this person who ends up hitting you and they're probably gonna have to pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 out of their own pocket to clear things because they have terrible insurance.
Yeah, full coverage doesn't always mean full coverage.
No,
so
it doesn't.
Sure
You have these commercials that tell you like, oh, you can get Progressive and this like full coverage for a certain amount of money, and that's not true. And you also don't realize how much it's going to cost. As a male, you're going to always pay a little bit more than females do because men, we're dumb. Sorry, it's true. We're dumb and we're worse drivers. That's just fact of life. We're crazy, and people don't really recognize that. But like, yeah, car insurance, like making sure you understand how much you're paying or what you're paying for it, because insurance companies will just like a health insurance, they'll end up just gouging you. Like you have to switch your car insurance a bunch over years, or else they'll just raise your prices for no reason. Again, these are things that you are not taught. Like we're taught that, oh, go with one job and stay there for your life. You find like a good business or something, like stay with that business because they're never going to betray you, whatever it is. Like, no, that's not these corporations do. Like, they're going to find ways to nickel and dime you the same way that these companies will find a way to nickel and dime you, and you're just a number to them. And that's not something you're really ever taught growing up. You're taught like loyalty, like value, like that's how you get places in life. But it's just the world changes, and I don't think the education system changes with it for you to understand. Like, how are you supposed to no one's going to teach you what happens when you have a car repossessed when you're, 16, 17, 18. Like, no one's telling you that. No one's telling you that, hey, yeah, I know your paycheck is this, but you should probably keep it, like, under this. It's like the law not law, but, like, it's the rules. Like, you should never be paying more than, like, 40% for your rent. Guess what? We don't live in that world half the time. Like, a lot of people, just for a tiny one-bedroom apartment, are paying 50, if not more, % of their paycheck every month to their rent because there's just not really cheap places to live, and how are you supposed to budget for that?
Yeah. Price of living has gone drastically up, and real estate has gone up. But, payment hasn't really changed at all.
No. It just isn't something you're taught. You're just like taught, if you go to school and you get a good job, you'll be set. Don't worry about these other things.
Yeah. Another thing I just realized too that you haven't learned in the past growing up, unions. One of my jobs I went to as a meat cutter. They didn't really explain unions that well to me. My parents did, or nobody at school, anybody. So I didn't know what the hell it was. The only thing I knew was like, oh, don't join a union or whatever. I'm like, okay, like why? Why not? And then my manager legit was like, when I asked about it, they're like, oh, I don't want to join that. Don't do that. And I'm like, oh, you. Now I look back at it, I'm like, you just wanted to make sure I could get fired if and I
Yep.
had nobody to back me up. You bastard.
You don't realize it, as a kid or like that. You don't realize that people are not out there to really help you or protect you. They're out for their own self-interest, especially when it isn't like a job role. Like they're not worried about you. It's the same reason like HR and big corporations are not there for you. They're there for the company to protect the company.
I didn't really realize how much I needed a union until God, what was it? Post office. 'Cause they're the biggest company to ever make a big deal out of the union because they needed it in the 70s. But now they're stuck in a contract trying to get better pay because they're still getting paid the same from the 70s, and it hasn't been up because it was great back then, but now it's like, not keeping up with the big things. And they got people like, UPS getting a lot more and keeping up with, times because they almost got sued for it on strike. But it's just like, if I didn't join the union at the post office, there could have been many of people that like could have fired me for no reason whatsoever. And there are people that will target you at certain jobs because you are part of the union, because you stick up for other people. It's a weird thing that they don't teach you about.
The spread of misinformation and limiting that, when you see it a lot more often with the baby boomer generation, where technology was like archaic and analog. And you see the spread of misinformation on social media sites. It's usually not like Gen Z or even millennials, because we're used to technology. And I think more and more that it's a good thing that, like, I think the school systems are actually helping, teach you when you are writing a paper or doing some research. It's like, hey, look at these kind of websites. Don't look at these websites. Like, if this looks not trustworthy, it probably is not true. Because again, something you're not really taught is the amount of scams and misinformation that you will find on the internet every single turn. Someone's always trying to make a buck off you. Someone's always trying to, borrow something from you. And it's not even people, it's just, you don't realize how bad the spread of misinformation is.
I just realized that too. We grew up around the computer boom, like, internet boom. So a lot of classes were made at that time to protect us from like certain websites or viruses or scams.
Yes.
So there's a reason why one of our uncles got caught sending $1,000 in a paper bills and a Bible to a prince in Africa, and compared to us, we're like, oh, that email's a scam, obviously. Because I remember now vividly, in computer class, like them telling me, these websites are safe. Make sure it has a lock on it, and like simple stuff like that. Like that stuff that's basic in my head that wouldn't have been basic if I'd never been taught it.
No.
So I can win a PS1 or PS2 for free if I just click this website. What?
You don't even realize what you're taught as a kid half the time is wrong in social constructs. You're taught that this book says this thing, so it must be true because they told us in school. And half the time, that's not even true. It's like the concept of Christopher Columbus and Columbus Day. We're all taught, when we're little, like, oh, these people do these great things. Andrew Jackson, look at the Louisiana Purchase. This is an amazing thing. You don't really realize in school that there's so many terrible things that happen in history, and we only hear one side of the story. There's another thing that you gotta learn as an adult. There's two sides to every single story. And a lot of times you're not going to like either of them.
I do love my history teacher. He was very like reading out a book and then go, all right, cool. So basically, I think we can kind of guess that Native Americans didn't give us land. I think that we kind of screwed them over a little bit. I think we can all agree on that or notice that.
No, and that's what you need to do. But I don't think a lot of, at least for me growing up, that was not what we were taught. Like, we were taught, like, Andrew Jackson did a great job. Like, yeah, we might have given them like smallpox with a blanket, but tee ha ha, America. And like, that's just that you don't realize those little stories that you kind of brushed off when you were in school actually were really monumental things that no one really told you was kind of monumental.
Yeah. Any questions I had were ignored. Teacher just goes, "Hey, yeah, whatever. Anyways, read word for word Tom Sawyer and make sure you say that word that you're uncomfortable with. It's okay.
And
it's a book. It's literature."
they don't. That's such a huge thing that no one ever tells you. Like no one ever tells you, and you hear it more and more in news that you have these school systems in certain states that are like trying to outlaw these more modern teachings, and they're like, oh, critical race theory, we can't teach things like that. And it's like, why not? Because you're scared that our books from 1940 that said America's not racist and everything are false.
My history teacher was really cool. He was the foot. I don't know how it always coordinates this, but the history teacher was.
Oh, history teachers are always football because it's the easiest thing for them to teach.
But
that's a fact of life.
So I'm Native American, which isn't really as discriminated against where I'm from, but places like South Dakota, or places where big reservations are very heavily discriminated against. But my
so much discrimination, and you don't even realize it as someone that doesn't grow around there. If you're not by Native American reservations, you don't realize how
there's stories
terrible
about
America treats them.
Yeah, there's stories about South Dakota at the hockey games where you have natives down below and rich white people above just pouring drinks on them. It's a lot of fucked up situations. And but my history
you're not taught
teacher,
that. You're not taught these kind of like you're only taught growing up. It's like, well, we were racist and had slaves, and then we just didn't because America's great. You don't really realize how much actually happens and how much like racism, like it doesn't just go away. And you're taught that as a kid that it just kind of went away one day. We're just like, slavery's bad, and that was just the end of it. Like that's not how the world actually works. And like when you're a kid, you think that, unless you're really in that environment that you understand what's going on in the real world. But like until you're really out and experiencing things, you don't. There's a lot of adults that don't even realize that's happening. A lot of adults that are like, especially if they're well-to-do, from well-to-do families and well-to-do areas in suburban, beautiful places, they're like, no, the things that are happening in the inner cities, that's their problem because they're dumb. And it's like, no, you just don't have any actual real-life experience to know what happens in the real world.
I'm sorry, the first black NASCAR driver got bullied out of NASCAR and called racial slurs all the time. That happened when? The 80s? I'm sorry? That's a little recent.
People don't realize how recent a lot of these activities actually were. Like, people don't realize how recent, like, if your thought process is if your thought process is the George Floyd incident, it was like it's like, oh my God, shocking. Like, how could America do this? It's like, no, this has existed all of this time. No one, just because you haven't paid attention to it or the media doesn't want you to know about it, does not mean it hasn't existed. And I think that's another big life lesson as an adult you need to learn. The media and television will point you in a direction that they want to point you in. It is not always the correct way to point you in. If you ever watched, do you remember the show Cops?
Oh, yeah. That went downhill fast.
Oh, it is. There are some documentaries about it and how the process of it existed where it was pitched that, hey, we're going to follow cops around and see them doing all these things. But no one ever told you that how much of that footage
ended up getting staged and...
No, not even staged.
Or
no, it was just edited in a certain way. So, like, if they shot... Here's 100% of what they shot. We only got to see 40% of it because the 60% of it with the police brutality and the awful things they did, they cut that part. They only showed the white saviors. They only showed that, like, hey, these white cops are doing a great job making sure these people of color are, they're doing terrible things on the street, but us white cops, we're fixing it. And you don't realize, like, that's the narrative that television was teaching us until, like, later on you're like, wait a minute. Something about this doesn't seem right. It's not just black and white, like, good cops, bad people. Like, you don't realize what you're taught on TV is not necessarily true. There's talking heads on the news telling you that you should feel this way about this thing. That's not true. A lot of that stuff is not true. It's there to rile you up or push an opinion. It's not. Everything you read and see is not true. And that's not to say, hey, don't believe in the COVID vaccine. That's not it. I'm not saying believe your own narrative. I'm saying, like, actually, like, if there's some research behind it, you should probably listen to it and or actually look for your own research on what is happening. Because if you're on your own little bubble, you're not going to really understand it. And Mary Jane Karen whatever face on Facebook telling you that the Jews faked the moon landing, and you can tell because the light coming this way clearly was a staged light, and they're on a big backdrop in a set. Yeah, they don't know just because they found some weird janky article from journalismorama by Ernie.com. Like, you're gonna again spread a misinformation and understanding that everything you read on the internet and see on TV is
and you
it's not
you
true.
hear that as someone who has like common sense about like not everything on the internet is true. We hear that and we're like, duh. But like there are people out there like that's been remote or just not exposed to people that just don't have that first instinct to think about it before they read it. Will read something and immediately think that's what's happening around them. It's not the fact that they think it's like true or that's like the truth being spoken to them like a Bible. It's just they read it and their first instinct is not to question it.
Do you think that the concept of being an adult changes from generation to generation?
Yeah, because look how simple it is from just my dad to me. Like he was born in 62 or 61 and he gives me the speech of when I was 18 years old, I had 4 cars and I had, like my first house and I was dating my first wife. And I was like, now I'm kind of lucky to be in a rental contract in 3 years. I don't know what's going to happen in 3 years. Kind of scared to redo that one and how much is going to go up. But, and I had the job. I had the job that everybody said was like, for a lot of people out there whose parents are always saying like, you got to go to get a job at the post office or you got to go be a nurse or you got to do this. I'm at the point in that generation, that timeline of our generation where it's not working anymore. Like it's just not enough.
No, it's not.
I made $55,000 last year, busting my ass for it. And we're working 6 days a week. 12-hour shifts, a lot of during Christmas time, packages, all that crap, overtime every Sunday, missing kids. My kid's birthday I was late to, busted my ass to get where I'm at. And now I'm making maybe $30,000 a year working for myself. And I'm already better off right now because I can afford things still, but having that job and having that $200 a month on gas or food to go buy out or just mental strain, so I just spent out at home, and I was still behind on bills. It still wasn't enough.
You're taught that you will, you get that job and then everything will be okay because you're keeping your nose to the grindstone and you're gonna just climb the corporate ladder, whatever it is, and that's really not true. Yeah, you could have done that in 1980, but you can't do that today. People get really angry that everyone's monetizing their hobbies, but we're kind of at that point where you have to. You can't just like enjoy things because you're like, I need to be making money off of this because I'm not making enough like money. Like I remember like 2006 thinking like, oh, if I make $65,000 a year, like I'm good. Everything is fine. Like I'll be able to live my life and everything will be and I will live comfortably and never have to like really worry about bills. Yeah, I might not be able to buy a Lamborghini, but like I'll be able to buy a new car every 3 years or like buy a house. And that's not really what the real world is like.
You know what your problem is, Richard?
What?
You're drinking
too
avocado many
toast?
$5 coffees and avocado toast. You're having too many.
You're right. It's the avocado toast and the coffees. If it wasn't for those, I would be able to have bought 3 houses by now.
Oh my God.
It was just drives me nuts hearing these stories online of people who are like, I don't understand. Like, I just made like $10,000 in the past 2 months off the stock market. And it's like, well, you had money. If you have, when you have money, it's easy to make more money from it. But when you know money, you can't take those risks always.
Your uncle died, you got $5,000 from it, you threw it in the stock market and got lucky with it? Yeah. I know a guy who
Most people can't do that. Most people get that $5,000 for like, oh, I can catch up on my bills.
Yeah. If I got $5,000 right now, I would have none of it. I would just spend it all on medical stuff and the baby coming. Like, that's it. I got a buddy of mine who's used to work for IBM, and he got retired early, and they said, hey, you got a 401k, but you can't have it. You got to get a check every month, or we're going to take a hell of a lot out of it. You can't just have it all. And they said, well, you could invest it in something, and then you get the total amount. So he ended up gambling his whole entire 401k on the stock market after working at IBM for 20 years or something like that. So it's a lot of money. He ended up getting lucky. And now he has, like, God knows how many, like, a warehouse full of cars. He's fucking set for life. Really cool guy. But he's it's just one of those things where he just had money and got lucky with it on the stock market. And there's a lot of people that you don't hear about who just lose money. You don't, because obviously if I
Oh yeah.
lose $5,000 on the stock market because I invested it because Uncle Joe died and I just threw it in there to try to get lucky with it and I lost it, I wouldn't be telling people that. You don't hear the
No,
bad
there's so many
stories.
stories that
Like,
you hear about people that like, especially around the like time of like market crashes. Like there's people that were so close to retiring back in like 2007, 2008, and the market crashes and all their investments are like,
yeah.
and like that's just what it's a really sad reality that happens to so many people, and it's not even their own fault because you're taught, at least for me when I was taught in like high school about stocks, it was like, hey, just take this money and throw it in the market, and then eventually it's just going to double or triple and it's going to be great. And that's they're just like, don't look at the market, just put money into it and you'll be good. Just buy like a couple stocks of Apple and a couple stocks of this and just like let it sit for a while and everything's going to be good. And by the time you retire, you'll have all this money. And that's not really always how it works. Like, yes, people have their 401ks, their 403bs, their Roth IRAs, whatever it is. And you are doing that. And, historically, yes, it has worked. It does work. But when you hear these people that have these extreme stories, 9 times out of 10, it's not just like casually pulling things in there. It's from like, I already took this money, so I have $10,000 and I put it into this one thing that just blew up and everything was great. And you don't realize how many people do stocks every single day and end up losing so much money just because they put things into the wrong thing. And it really is a gamble.
Business lottery. Yeah, it's just business lottery.
That's what it is. And one crazy thing I learned as an adult that I didn't recognize as a child was gambling is so instilled into us. It is so instilled into us in our everyday life and every single thing that we do. And it sounds really silly, but you were gambling when you were little and you might not have even have known it. So let's take the most basic thing. It's something I had to recognize. I collected Pokemon cards when I was little. You could have collected Magic, you could have collected Yu-Gi-Oh, you could have collected whatever it is. That's gambling. You were giving someone money on the thought process that this pack of cards might have that one thing that I really want. It might have that Charizard card that I really, really want, and it's worth tons of money and everything's great. And I open tons of packs. I might not get it. And there's certain things that are tangible, like again, Pokemon cards, where yes, I might not hit the jackpot, but if I enjoy the cards, illustrations, I enjoy the content of Pokemon, yeah, it's okay, it's cool, great, awesome. But like, you're still not making money off of it. And there's so many things that we were little, like we were taught that, even playing a video game where there's these loot boxes in video games, or I take all Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo GameCube, if anyone remembers that, you would get coins for doing good, and you put those coins into a slot machine, and you have a chance of getting a trophy of a character that you like. Like, that was gambling. Every single thing that we were doing when we were little, there's so many things that were gambling. And you just don't recognize it.
I should have known the red flags. And Pokemon, like Red and Blue, and I think Gold and Silver, they had the game houses or whatever.
The slot machines.
The slot machines. Yeah, I was addicted to those as a kid. I should have saw the red flag of addictive habits.
You don't realize how much addictive things are in society when you're a kid versus when you're an adult. Even like the food you eat. Like the amount of preservatives and things that are in there, like it's not natural that a 7 or 8-year-old is craving like a cosmic brownie. That's not natural. That shouldn't be a thing. Like, they're not craving an apple. They're not craving like a steak. They're craving like a very processed sugary thing, and it makes you wonder, like, oh, what's happening? What are these things that I'm eating that are causing crazy cravings? Like, there's people that go through like withdrawals equivalent to nicotine withdrawals. Like, oh, you stopped smoking? I stopped eating donuts, and it's been rough for like a caffeine addiction. Like, people don't realize how many addictions there really are. And a lot of times when you're doing it, as a kid, you might be enjoying it, but you don't recognize a lot of the addictions you have or might develop are coping mechanisms for past
I shouldn't like caffeine as much as I do. I shouldn't even be having caffeine because of my ADHD. I have to take Adderall to control my ADHD and do good on my, focusing and getting stuff done. But like, caffeine has never affected me to make me hyper. It's never made me. I could drink a cup of coffee and go take a nap. There's no reason I should be having caffeine right now. There's no bodily function other than addiction that I just drink. My dad grew up drinking coffee, and I love the smell of coffee. I love my dad. I love, the reminiscence of my dad waking up in the morning, making the same kind of, spoon sound every single time in the morning. It's a nice memory in my head. I drink it for that. Celsius, I don't feel anything. I just drank this whole thing. My heart's gonna give out by the time I'm 40 because I like the taste of this. I don't know why. There's no reason I should be having this other than addiction. Like, I'm fully well aware of that. Like, it's so weird the amount of like simple addictions that we have through just the store.
Oh yeah, and you're growing up, you're taught the only addiction you have to fight off is like, don't be an alcoholic and don't smoke cigarettes, and like everything else is like, it's fine, everything's gonna be fine. You're not gonna find other addictions. Like it's like everything is taught very simply when you're a kid, but when you're an adult, you don't realize you develop addictions to so many different things. Like you can have an addiction to watching YouTube videos. You can be like, I can't function. I gotta just
doom
watch
scrolling,
these things,
dude.
or like doom scrolling like on TikTok. Like that's a real addiction. Like just scrolling for hours on TikTok, that's a thing. Or like just being addicted to social media. People don't realize that's a huge thing, especially for like millennials and all. And like, it's a real, like, people make fun of iPad kids, but like sometimes like it's not as simple like black and white. Like, oh, just put it down. It's like, well, sometimes they just can't. And
there's so many people like
scary.
Parenting wise. Like I'm very like not strict, but I'm very like, Ari doesn't take a tablet out in public. She doesn't go to the grocery store and I shove a phone in her face, and she'll like, because the same parents that get mad at their kid being on the phone 24/7 are basically 9 times out of 10 the same parents that shove a phone in the kid's face and they don't want to deal with them because they're at the store talking to one of their friends. So you're getting mad at your kid for having this addiction of being on their phone too much or watching YouTube when you're the one that's also pushing it on them when you're doing something. So it's like when you don't want them to be involved. So a lot of these habits are also things that we're learning that are actually our fault. So I've always prioritized Ari's like social skills outside and doing stuff with her other than phone stuff. And at home, go nuts, do whatever you want to. Like, I don't care if you're on the she doesn't prefer sitting on the TV all day. If I say, hey, let's go outside, let's do something right quick, and we'll do it. We'll go right now and do it. So I don't really mind the TV time per se. But yeah, no, a lot of these people that complain about iPad kids are the parents, the iPad parents that use it as a shut up mechanism. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm stressed out from work and I got to get through this grocery store. I just want to get in the store and get out. Here's an iPhone,
I'm going to play devil's advocate because I agree with you to an extent, but there's other times where like, that's another thing no one ever really taught you about being an adult, especially like if you're a parent or something. Like you're taught like you're just going to do your 40-hour work week. Like, oh, you can have kids, you can do all these things and balance it all out. And like that, the societal standards and expectations are just insane, especially for the societal standards that like people put on women to be like, oh, you're gonna now work like 40 to 50 hours a week, but also like you gotta take care of these kids, and like you don't. There's a reason that marriage benefits men more than it benefits women, like 9 times out of 10, because we are societally, it's improving, but it still exists where we as a society are just like, no, like the women will take care of the kids, they'll do these things, and we just got to work. And like, that's not how is someone who gave birth to the kid, like, how are they have to balance working, they have to balance taking care of the kid, like they have to balance so many different things, and like that's just not a realistic standard to expect for like one person to do. Like there's so many people that just ignore how difficult being a mother really truly is compared to like what like the books and things we learned growing up are like, oh, you just have kids and like it just comes natural, like you'll just figure it out. Like being a mom's always an easy little thing. It's like we don't live in a world like in 1960 where she is staying home taking care of the house and the kid, and like that's just it. Like that's
a lot of
first of all, that's not physically possible anymore because it's the world's expensive, and two, it's not just like that's why you have like these baby boomers that are so messed up because they just have these societal standards. They expect this, and like it's just weird to put this much pressure on to people.
It's a lot. It has to do with a lot with like how we grew up, because that's what we saw. Still, because that was like towards the end of stay at home mom kind of thing was when I guess not the early 2000s, but we still had this like expectation or like in our back of our embedded in our brain of girl work and all this stuff. I grew up thinking that you cook, I clean, like, or if I clean, you cook,
Yes.
or it's just a team effort. That's how I was raised. And I when I was working my 60-hour plus work weeks, Felicia was amazing, because she picked up slack at home where I wasn't home, and it was just like, and I was just so exhausted that I couldn't play with Ari, or I couldn't, I didn't have energy for anything, and it was just wake up, get Ari to school, go home, go to work, go home, and just sleep at that point. And it was just like, it's so hard. And thank God Felicia wasn't working at that time, because like if she was working, then it would be like both of us are exhausted. And it comes down to another thing they don't teach you about is the price of kids, because you have,
Oh yeah,
even if, okay, let's say
it's $1 million a kid.
yeah, like you were saying, guy work, girl stay at home, right? And then you're like, well, let's not do that. Let's both work. But then depending on the job that she gets, especially just, getting a random job, that daycare, like if you have nobody to like fall back on or help out, like there's a long time when we had no help from nobody and we paid for babysitting all the time.
Yep.
Your whole entire check goes towards that. So at that
Yeah.
point, what's even the point of working?
My biggest thing is like, I'm not like anyone that wants to have a kid like should have the ability to have a kid. But at the same time, there's a societal standard and there's like a responsibility that you need to have. Like, if you can't afford to have a kid, like, no one's questioning if you can love a kid. Anyone can be an amazing parent and love their child, but it costs some money. And if you can, like, you got to be able to afford that child and all the changes that they're going to go through and providing what they need, food, shelter, clothing. Like, you can... If you have a sick day, with a dog or a cat, like, they don't take that much. The thing, like, if I get sick, if the dog only goes out like twice a day or something, it's like, okay, whatever, they can survive for a little bit. But like, you can't do that with a kid. You can't just be like, I'm sick, I can't take care of this kid. That's full on neglect. Like, that's something they don't really, again, they don't teach you. Like, you're sick when you're a kid, you take a sick day. You're just like, so whatever. Like, you're sick from work. If the luxury, you just stay home from work. But you can't do that with a child, and no one teaches you that.
Yeah, I don't. When I was working, I don't think I had, like, I maybe took one sick day, and that was it. Like, I never got sick, and I think I do fully believe that your body and your mind will, like, I don't know if it like takes years off your life, but I full-heartedly believe that your body will like kick a virus out just so you can keep working, because your mindset's on, I gotta work or I can't. There's no choice. I gotta work. So the what was it? I believe I'm full-heartedly agree to an extent, because I believe that there are a lot of people out there that can love their kid but can't take care of their kid.
That's a huge thing.
Yeah, if you have, don't have money, you have a fast food job, and there are, as long as you can pay rent and get there are things you could do that will help you afford. There's diaper banks, there's like food banks, there's so many different things that you could do, but you got to do that. You got to put in that.
There's infrastructure
work.
set up to assist you. Again, something that you're not taught.
Exactly. It's like,
and societally, a lot of times I feel like societally we're also taught to look down upon people that need help.
exactly. Food stamps. Like, the people will like berate you about getting food stamps. Like, people that are giving you the food stamps were like, well, how come you're not getting a job? How come you're not doing this? Or if you file for unemployment because you lost your job, it's like, what are you doing to do better? What are you doing? It's like, really.
America loves the victim blame.
Oh yeah. There's people in town that will judge you for walking because there's no sidewalks. You just walk to the store.
Yep.
Why are you on the side of the street in the grass? Like, what are you doing? Like, I just wanted to walk, dude. Like, why is it so frowned upon in America that that's a big part of over obesity too, is America, we just drive everywhere. Like, there's like the corner store down the road, I could drive to it. I don't have to walk to it. If you vacation anywhere in the UK, anywhere else that has public transportation, you're walking your ass off. Like, it's it's really an American thing.
It's an American thing because also we're a weird country that's super spread out.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a city or like in a metropolis area, you can do that, but like it's harder in the countryside to be like.
Exactly.
I will take my own biases and like lay them out. Like I can be honest. Like if I see someone in the countryside just walking down the random road, I'm like, it's a little weird. Okay, whatever. But like if you see someone walking in the city, you're like, okay, that's just part of the game. But like that's not how the world works. Like not everyone is in a city or metropolitan area where they have that luxury to be like, oh, I can walk anywhere I need to. There's places that are very spread out in the world.
And I'm not going to walk to Food Line. I'm not going to go, to the grocery store. I'm not going to walk there. There's no sidewalks. That's not safe. I'm driving.
America does need more sidewalks. That's one thing I have noticed. Like we societally do not have sidewalks, and people think it's weird when you walk places, like you said.
There were there's a really cool story in my town where they were building a new high school in this area, and this guy took a shovel and like one of those like tampers, big heavy metal tampers, and they just made their own little dirt sidewalk all the way down for people. And it was because people kept walking in the street and almost getting hit. So they legit spent like a whole summer just foot by foot making a sidewalk. It was really cool.
Before we wrap up, there is one more thing as an adult I think you really need to learn, and it's not really taught to you. It's taught to you to a certain regard when you're little, but you're not really specifically drilled into your head. And as cheesy as it sounds,
don't post that thing on Facebook. Just delete it. You don't have to say it.
Well, that too. But I was gonna say thinking with a level head, thinking with your brain instead of your emotions, because they're to one extreme. When you have an argument or something in high school, middle school, and you start throwing hands, you have a fist fight, whatever it is, there are people to break up that fight. No one's gonna die. Yeah, you might get seriously hurt, whatever it is, but no one's gonna die. When you're in the real world as an adult, you need to think with a level head because you don't know what that person next to you is going through or what they're thinking. Every single day you look at the news, people do stupid things, win stupid prizes. They get in a fight with the wrong person on the street and they get shot. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just everything you do with a level head. If someone really pisses you off, unless they're like putting your life in danger, sometimes you really just do need to just shrug it off. Like they cut you off on the highway. Yeah, they're an asshole, but like ramming them with your car and that intrusive thought that you have is not the solution.
Dude, I have to go get a appointment because I think I'm actually developing EID, explosive impulse disorder or whatever. Because there will be moments where I'm just strung out and stressed out, and I just like want to explode and just go to the backyard and like punch a tree or something. Like it just, and then it's gone after like 5 seconds, and I'm like, might be something there. And then I find out from my dad, it's like, oh yeah, I take these little pills called fluoxetine. And, I'm like, you used to be angry when I was a teenager. Like, you're not now. I'm like, is this a family thing? I think you should have told me that. Medical history is another thing you need to learn growing up.
Oh, medical history and yeah, understanding. I think one thing society is doing slowly better. When we were little, I believe, especially the generations before us, that mental health was not a thing. Mental health was just keeping in line with the keeping calm and rational thinking. They did not believe that, like, if you were seeing a therapist, if you were getting medication for your mental, like, there's something wrong with you, like, you're serious, like, you were not going to don't talk to that person, like, they're in therapy, they're on some antidepressant, they're on some anti-anxiety thing. We're as a society, and I don't know if it's accidental that we are normalizing it a bit more because people are sad, happy, whatever expression on TikTok it is, but like it's more normalized to talk about mental health and get mental health checks.
Oh,
and I think
yeah,
as an adult, that's a very important thing to do, and make sure your mental health is very just important, because again, when you're little, you're just taught like, hey, you might get some colds or something later on in life, but like unless something really big happens when you're old, you'll be fine between the ages of like 22 to 65. Like nothing really is gonna happen. That's not true. Like your stress and anxiety can really debilitate someone. It can really debilitate someone without knowing it. So like it is okay to see a therapist. It is okay to take
It's so easy now. There's so many like
It
apps
is.
out there. Like my company, like would pay for a therapist if I called them because they wanted me to keep working, obviously, and they wanted me to, push me to keep doing stuff. But I'll say this too. As when I had medical days and like sick leave and annual leave, take your fucking mental days off. Take your mental check days, dude. You need them. Like don't feel bad. Don't let your work make you feel bad for missing work because you just don't have it in you. You don't because like driving to work when stressed out or so much on your mind, that is dangerous in and of itself, let alone wearing your body out and your mind out. So take your mental health days. One more thing before we go, speaking with a level head, very important, very, very, very important, because there was a story at one of the bars I used to go to in my town of Durham. There was a fight that happened. It was one of those just random bar fights. People didn't know how to de-escalate, and they just one guy knocked one guy out, fell on the concrete, hit his head, died. That guy's in jail now because of a impulsive bar fight, because he just didn't have a level head with it. It was hopped up on rage and alcohol. So like legit, like Richard said, it sounds silly, but think with a level head before you do something, like common sense wise. Like this, it's hard in the moment. I understand 100% because I'm the same way. But you will feel silly after or be in jail because of a freak accident. So just
100%.
Yeah, just
100%.
just think, be a human.
Have empathy.
Yeah.
If we can leave you with anything today, it's please have some empathy for those around you, even if they do not have empathy for you.
I wanted to have empathy so bad. I had a book. I read a book in high school called The Art of Happiness, I think, and it was by a lawyer and the Dalai Lama over a spring of years, having a few interviews. Really cool book to read. But they were teaching you about empathy, and the Dalai Lama was like, "Hey, to have empathy, you need to forgive a lot of people." And then they listed off these really horrendous, atrocious things about something that happened in history. And the lawyer was like, "You just gotta forgive that?" And the guy was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, empathy's a lot harder than I thought it was, because
empathy is very hard. It's something I think everyone struggles with. I struggle with it. Anyone can struggle with it, truly. Mm-hmm. But with that, thank you for listening to this very depressing, but hopefully a little bit educational episode of
eye-opening.
of our podcast of Brews and Who Knew. As always, if you are on Spotify or Apple Music listening to it, we have a YouTube channel, we have TikTok, we have Instagram. Go follow those. Go watch our videos. You can watch these videos all over the place. Whatever you want to do. Feel free to actually make TikToks and everything of our stuff. We love more content. It makes our lives so much easier.
And don't forget to follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/brewsandwhoknew. And for just $1, you can also get early access to things like videos and just kind of a whole community of us. So, and give suggestions.
Yes.
This is your wake-up call. If you're under the age of 25 and you're on your parents' insurance, get that doctor visit right now.
Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to say that. Yeah, you get kicked off your parents' insurance real quickly. Don't forget that.
Yeah, it catches up fast.
That's crazy. That's a crazy thing.
Blood work once a year.
Like I think it's 26, 25, whatever it is. Blood work. Yeah, that's important.
Because white blood cell count's a real thing. If you don't catch it early, you will probably have terminal cancer. It's fucking check every year.
Crazy.
Check up every year.
Yes. But again, please do not compare yourself to Tom, Dick, and Harry down the street, whatever they're doing. Run your own race. Just care about yourself. Not in a selfish way, but care about your health and your mental, and you're important. And just remember that being an adult's not easy because we're not really taught it. So have some grace for yourself.